Hello, I am Sachin Ruhela and I am a test prep instructor at Hale Education Group. Here at Hale, our passion is to help you unlock the mathematical potential and conquer the SAT math section. I have dedicated my career in making math not just understandable but enjoyable for students like you. Okay guys, so let's start with the first topic. Let's understand one topic which is called modulus. I hope you have heard this topic, mod. You call it absolute value, you call it mod. So for example, if I say mod 5, what is the value of mod 5? Mod 5 is nothing but 5, right? If I say negative of mod 5, now what's the value of negative of mod 5? That's again 5. I hope most of you already knew this. Now, for example, if I say mod of x is equal to 5, what does that tell me about x? Now, x has two possible values, which is plus 5 and minus 5. Okay, so now what is the main question here? The main question here is, why does it happen? Why when something negative goes inside the mod, it comes out to be positive? So let's understand, what does modulus actually signify? So when I say mod of x is equal to 5, that actually represent the distance of x from 0 on the number line, which is 5. So if you understand the modulus in the context of distance, no modulus will ever trouble you. So when I say mod of x is equal to 5, that means if I go 5 points away from 0, where will I reach? I will reach plus 5. If I go 5 points away from 0 on this side, where will I reach? I will reach minus 5. There are two values of x now. So x is 5 or x is minus 5. Okay. So this 5 is not the value. This 5 actually represents the distance of this point from 0 on the number line. Okay, so let's understand one more application for this. Now, for example, if I say mod x minus 2 is equal to 5. Now, in these kind of scenarios, how will I read this mod in the context of distance? So let's try to understand this. So here I said that mod x is equal to 5. I hope everyone can read this now. This is actually mod x minus 0 is equal to 5. Now this minus 0 is so insignificant, we don't even bother to write it. But that's the correct format in which I should express it. So if I try to read it in the same way, I will read it like this. Distance of x from 2 is 5. Now if I am able to interpret this, it becomes a cakewalk. You see, the distance of x from 2 is 5. Now if I go 5 points ahead, where will I reach? I will reach plus 7. If I go 5 points behind 2, I will reach negative 3. So now there are two possible values of x. X could be 7 or x could be negative 3. So you realize this is how we read absolute value in the context of distance. And if you are able to do so, modulus will be way simple. Okay. Now let's learn an interesting trick to work in some questions on geometry. Okay, so let's look at a question. Let's say this is a square. P, Q, R and S. Now if I join the diagonal of the square, okay, and then I also join T and U. Now T and U, remember, is the midpoint of PS and RS respectively. Okay, so we have a figure here where the dimension of a square is 7 and I need to figure out the area of this shaded portion. So as you can see guys, in this question, this is a very basic geometry question where I need to figure out the area of this shaded portion, and the question is area of this shaded portion over area of this total portion. So that's my final question. Okay, so now do we handle a question like this? There are multiple ways in which we can solve a question like this. Now, one way is, if I look at the figure PRUT, that looks like a trapezium to me, yes? So I can very well use the formula for trapezium, but does everyone knows the formula for trapezium? I don't think so. So it's not a wise way to handle the question with trapezium. Now what's another better way of doing this question? You see, this is a triangle, PSR. If I take this bigger triangle and subtract the smaller triangle from the bigger triangle, do you realize what I will be left with? I will be left with the shaded part. So let's try to do that. Area of shaded portion. I know area of a triangle is half into base into height. Half into base. Now, the base for the bigger triangle I can see is 7. The base is 7. And what is the height of the bigger triangle? Obviously, because it's a square, so the height is also 7. That's the area of the bigger triangle. If I subtract the area of the smaller triangle, which is TSU, that is half. What is the base? Now, since it is the midpoint, the base is 7/2. And what is the height? The height is also 7/2. So that will give me the area of the shaded portion, and if I divide the entire thing by the total area, which is pretty straightforward, area of a square, that is 7 times 7. So now if I try to solve this, I'll get 49/2 minus 49/8 whole divided by 49. Now what will I do? I will take 49 common from the numerator. So I will be left with 1/2 minus 1/8 over 49. Now this 49 and 49 cancels out. I'll eventually left with 1/2 minus 1/8, which is nothing if I take an LCM, which is 4 minus 1 on the top, and this is nothing but 3/8. So guys, this is my answer. Okay, so now this is one way of handling this question, which is pretty straightforward, but there is one more very interesting way to handle a question like this. Now guys, if you notice, a square is a perfect symmetry. Now what do I mean when I say a perfect symmetry? Look on the board. This square can be broken down into smaller symmetrical parts. Now how will I do that? I'll simply join the midpoints. You see, I'm joining the midpoints. Now if I want to make a perfect symmetry, these two midpoints are also joined. So I will join these two midpoints. So what I have done here, I have broken this square into smaller symmetrical triangles, if you can see. Now how many triangles? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now if you notice, the area of the total portion is nothing but is equivalent to 8 triangles. And if you look at the shaded part, it is made up of how many triangles? 3 triangles. Triangle cancel out, and as you can see, my answer is just 3/8. So do you realize one student will spend 90 seconds on this question? He's also right. Another student will just spend maybe 10 to 20 seconds on this question and get it right. So is he more intelligent? No, he is more effective, and that's what SAT is testing you on, how effective you are as a test taker. So now let's understand one interesting way to handle fractions. Here is the question. Pause the video for 30 seconds and see if you can handle this question. Okay, so now let's try to solve this question. Now here, if you notice, there are 3 fractions given to me in the question. Let's say A is 2/3, B is 1/5, and C is 1/4. Now, most of the times, how does the student start this question? The student starts by taking the total work as 1. Now, let's try to do by the method where most students try, and then we'll try to understand an interesting way of handling this question. So let's say the work is 1. Now A came and A did 2/3 of the work. So how much work A did? A did 2/3. How much work is still left? Now 1 minus 2/3. That means 1/3 of the work is still left. Then what happens? Then B came and B did 1/5 of the remaining work. So B came and did 1/5 of 1/3. So B ended up doing 1/15 of the work. And then what happened? Then B also left. So how much work is still remaining? Now previously work left was 1/3 and B came and finished 1/15 out of it. So how much work is still left? 4/15. Now what happened? Now C came and did 1/4 of the remaining work. So C came and did 1/4 of the remaining work. So that means how much work C did? C also did 1/15. Now how much work is still left? Previously work left was 4/15. C came and finished 1/15. So how much work is still left? That's 3/15, which is eventually 1/5. And the question is asking you what fraction of the work is left, which is nothing but 1/5. Now let's try to understand a better way of handling this question. So guys, whenever you see a question on percentage, what is the first number that clicks in your head? I guess 100, right? Similarly, whenever you have fractions in the question, I have a lot of fractions in the question. So whenever we talk about fractions, the good number to start the question is the product of denominators. Now what is the product of denominators here? 3 into 4 into 5, which is 60. So let's try to do this question by taking the work as 60 and understand the difference. A does 2/3 of the work. 2/3 of 60 is 40. So how much work is still left? 20. Then B came and did 1/5 of 20. 1/5 of 20 is how much? 4. So how much work is still left? 16. And then C came and did 1/4 of the remaining. 1/4 of 16 is again how much? 4. So how much is left? 12. Now what fraction of the work is left? The amount of work left divided by my total work, which is 12 out of 60, and as you can see, which is nothing but 1/5. Now you see which method is more convenient, the first one or the second one? For me, it's definitely second one. Why? Because I am only working with integers, and guys, working with integers on any particular day will be more convenient than working with fractions. Okay guys, so now let's understand some important points that you need to remember regarding solving your inequalities. Okay, so we'll see them and then we'll take one example. So the first point is, if I say the product of two terms is greater than 0, what can I conclude regarding A and B? Now here, if the product of two terms is greater than 0, I can say that they will definitely have same signs, isn't it? That means either both of them will be positive or both of them will be negative. That's a very important point to remember, right? Now let's understand the second important point, where actually students make a lot of mistakes. So if I say AX is equal to BX, can I conclude the argument by saying A is equal to B? No. So remember guys, for example, if A becomes 2 and B becomes 3, X can very well be 0. So that means the equation is balanced. However, A is not equal to B. So how do we really handle a situation like this? We take everything on one side. So AX minus BX is equal to 0. Now if I try solving it further, I will take X common from this expression. That will give me A minus B is equal to 0. Now the product of two terms is equal to 0. That means what? Either A minus B is equal to 0, that will make A is equal to B. So I am not denying the fact that A can't be equal to B, but there is a big or in between. Or what could happen? X can be equal to 0. Now if X becomes equal to 0, I have no clue about A and B. right? So these 2 points are very important for you to understand and solve inequalities. Now let's try to take one example and see how we can use this to solve any particular inequality. So let's look on the board. If I say x square is greater than x, I want to solve this inequality. Now, can I cancel x on both the sides? No. We just learned here that we will not cancel x on both the sides. We will take it on one side and then solve it. So x square minus x is greater than 0. Now what can I take common here? I can take x common. That will be x minus 1 greater than 0. Now if you notice, I can clearly see the product of two terms is greater than 0. That means what's the conclusion? They will have same signs. Now let's go for the first scenario. They can both be positive. Now if both of them are positive, that means x is greater than 0 and x minus 1 will also be greater than 0, which will make x greater than 1. So if I look at this solution, what is the end result? I can clearly see that x is greater than 0 and x is also greater than 1. So I relate that x will always be greater than 1. This is one possibility. Now comes an OR. Now this is one scenario. Let's take the other scenario. Both negative. Now if both of them are negative, that means x will be less than 0 and x minus 1 will also be less than 0. That will make x less than 1. Now if I take this as a solution and try to put it on the number line, what will I get? I realize that x is less than 0 and it is also less than 1. So what's the common region? The common region is less than 0. So when I decoded both the scenarios, what is the final outcome? I can clearly see, based on this outcome, x will either be more than 1 and based on this outcome, x will either be less than 0. So do you realize this is the best way of solving an inequality, and I get the range as x is either less than 0 or x is greater than 1. So from here we learned that how do we solve any particular inequality. This is the best way of solving any inequality, and if you know this, the inequalities will be a lot simpler. To learn more about our program and to learn other tips and tricks to ace your SAT and ACT exam, reach us at team@haleeducation.com.